Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode on the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm being joined by a very special guest. Lesya Holzapfel is here today in the house. That's a mouthful. I love it. Hopefully I did that correctly. And I'm so excited that you're here, Lesya. This is going to be such a powerful conversation. And I'm really looking forward to sharing your story and your journey and obviously what you do with my audience. So without further ado, let's just dive straight into this. And why don't you start by sharing a little bit about your journey and your story and what got you into obviously the really powerful work that you're doing today.
So hi, thank you for having me. So excited that you're here. Excited that you finally have your own podcast. I know you were on my show like last year and you're going to be on my show again soon. So I'm really excited for you. So oh my gosh, my journey. Where do we begin? Right? I feel like everyone's like, well, how far back do you want me to go? I always struggled with weight. I truly thought about it this morning. I was like, I feel like I've been dieting for most of my life. So in my teenage years, and I think a lot of women can relate, I just started dieting. I always had struggled with my weight. So I figured, if I go to school and learn how nutrition works, then I'll be able to fix my own issues. So I studied to be a dietitian in college, got all the knowledge, graduated, really didn't learn much. I think I was really upset because I learned that coconut oil was bad in school. And I was really into coconut. Yeah, they're saturated fat, coconut oil is bad. And I was like, this is blasphemy. I can't be teaching this because I knew in the back of my mind, it didn't make sense. So I pursued other things, other careers. Then I got pregnant, gained a lot of weight in my pregnancies in 2015 with my first baby. And this is when I discovered a low carb keto diet, which back then nobody knew about. It was nobody did it. Now it's the cool thing to do, but nobody knew what it was back then. It's what is this low carb? And my friend had done it and she told me about it, that she lost a lot of weight and had so much energy. I was like, this cannot be healthy for you, eating all this fat and giving up carbs. You need carbs to survive, right? All of the things that I was taught in school, but I was so desperate that I decided to give it a try. And it worked for me. It worked really well. I lost all this weight. But like most women, I approached it as a diet, not a lifestyle. And I wasn't doing it in the healthy way. And so I had gained all my weight back, got pregnant again, gained a bunch of weight, gained 60 pounds, was 200 pounds after my second baby. And this time I was like, okay, I want to go back to this way of eating this keto low carb, but I want to make it a lifestyle. I want to make it sustainable. I want to make it work where it's a healthy way of doing it. So I did. I went back, lost all the weight within 8 months. And everyone kept on asking me what are you doing? How are you doing this? I just started an Instagram page, sharing my journey, sharing my recipes, everything. And it kind of blew up. And that's when keto got popular. So I started a holistic clean keto food blog called Eat Be Fit Explore. It's still up and running now, but women were like, we need more support, more help. And that's when I started a membership site and now a coaching program. So really what I discovered was it's really low carb keto is great for weight loss, but you need to make sure that you approach it in a holistic way and you're looking at all aspects. We'll talk about what is the root cause of things like sugar addiction, emotional eating, binge restrict cycle. And that's kind of where I evolved and where I am today, where I'm kind of approaching it more in a holistic way and helping women do the same. In a nutshell, that's my story.
Yeah, you nailed it. That was so good. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And this is really, really neat because we've known each other for a little bit and we're actually both, we both have the same mentor in business. And I didn't know a lot of that about your story. So this is really, really powerful what you've been through. And obviously the ups and downs that I know so many of my listeners can really relate to. I'm curious, what was the difference between, actual specifics, with how you were doing keto before. And like you were saying, this unhealthy keto versus what you actually changed, what's the difference there for anybody who's looking what are the unhealthy ways essentially to do it that I know so many people out there are, getting sucked into versus actually making it a lifestyle?
Yeah. So when I first started keto, I was really obsessed with the carbs. I actually ended up getting carbaphobia, which we can talk about today of what that is and how so many women have it. But I was so obsessed with how many carbs I was eating and tracking everything. Like my only goal was just to make sure that I had my carbs under a certain number, which meant that I was like neglecting vegetables. So what happened was, this is like, I discovered this years later when I actually did a microbiome test, was like, I was missing this type of fiber in my gut because I was neglecting like the fiber from vegetables for so long. And so what I was doing was, all I was worrying about was the carb number, meaning that I would just eat and just track the carbs. And I was obsessed with the calories, obsessed with the carbs. And I would eat anything that was like a keto food. So like it started getting really popular and companies started making all these foods and slapping the label keto on it. And what would happen was, they would be sending me it to like do shout outs for them and free product. And I was like, back then it was like, oh, free product. No, so you take free product. So I was eating all these foods and they had all these like artificial preservative ingredients in them. All these sweeteners that were just hijacking my brain and causing me to still get cravings from sugar, which we can talk about. Like I was trying to get off of sugar because I had an addiction to sugar. And so I was becoming reliant on these foods. And essentially what I did was I took the standard American diet, which I see so many women do, and I switched it to a keto standard American diet, which I was still eating all the junk food, all the processed food. It was just keto now. So I'd be eating like a lot of dairy, a lot of processed meats, like hot dogs and like cheese on everything, like cheese galore and heavy cream, like on everything. And it was more of like what people call now dirty keto, and really neglecting whole real foods and paying attention more to quantity than quality. And I ended up gaining a lot of weight from doing this, which is why I transitioned to more of the clean keto. And not only that, but then there's the other side of it, was like beyond the nutrition, right? You know this, like beyond the nutrition, like the mental stuff and my sleep. And I didn't deal with my sugar addiction and my binge eating that I used to have. Keto was like masking all of that. And then the hormones and the stress. And I had a lot of chronic stress from just trying to juggle motherhood and entrepreneurship. And so I started gaining weight because I wasn't paying attention to that. And so that's kind of the wrong way, I would say, to do keto. I know people can argue with me, but I truly believe there is a right or a wrong way. And so I switched to this holistic approach where I focused on real clean foods and not so much about the macros. And I made sure that I got vegetables in, that I got fiber in, that I wasn't paying attention so much about just obsessing about the carbs. And I eliminated most of the dairy and the sweeteners and the keto junk foods and the processed foods. I don't eat that anymore. And I just made it more of and I paid attention then more to my sleep and my stress and my mental health and all of that, which is kind of this holistic approach that I feel like if you do it that way, then keto is amazing. But if you're going to do it the dirty way, sure, you might lose weight, but long-term, it's not very healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for explaining that. I think that's going to be really eye-opening for everybody listening because, and I've seen this so much. It's so easy to fall into that trap, right? Where the food industry knows that we want quick, convenient foods, right? And they know what is the newest thing that everybody's onto, whether it's veganism or keto or like whatever it is, right? Gluten-free. And they will make products loaded with chemicals that, fit that criteria, but aren't actually made of real food. So I think that's a really that before as well, in getting sucked into, like, it's okay, it's healthy because it says it's keto, right? Or it says it's sugar-free, but what are they putting in there instead? Right. And what damage is that actually doing to your body? So I'm, really love that you highlighted that, because I think that's an important place for all of us to kind of maybe take stock of how are we actually approaching, however we choose to eat, right? Whether it's keto or something else, are you actually focusing on whole real foods, or is it becoming, and you mentioned this as well, which is, an area that I become really fascinated with, and maybe we can go there next, because I know that, you've mentioned that you had a history of, binge eating and sugar addiction, like the actual mental aspect and toll that being so obsessed with food, right? Essentially, when we have this limiting way of eating, and that's why, I'm always skeptical of all these like new diets or different ways of eating, because I'm wonder about the mindset piece of limiting ourselves and essentially becoming more obsessed with food, which we've been doing our whole lives, and, really is the opposite of feeling free and at peace with food, having to measure everything. And like you said, being obsessed over carbs where you were before. So how did that sort of evolve for you? And more specifically, like the way that you're living now, how do you, really feel that's contributed to, shifting, your patterns with binge eating and sugar that you had in the past?
Yeah. So I didn't know that I had a sugar addiction. I was kind of in denial until 2020 when I decided to give it up for a year, which is like the worst year to do it. But this was before I knew it was going to happen, but I did it anyway. But I had a history of sugar addiction from when I was younger, because I grew up in a household that I'm Ukrainian. And so my parents, like, they never bought us any like junk food or dessert or anything. Like, we had some pop here and there, but like, I was pretty much deprived of it. Like, we weren't allowed to eat any of that. So when I was a teenager and I would like had my own money, like I would go and buy all of it and like hoard it and binge eat it. And I think that's kind of where it all started, just because of that deprivation and that restriction. So I never really handled that. And then when I was always dieting, always binging, restricting, I was either on a diet or I was fully binging, but I was too young to realize what I was doing in my mental patterns. When I found keto, I was like, okay, this works. So I restricted everything, right? Because like you pretty much do restrict a lot of things on keto, and it worked, and it helped my cravings go down and all that. And it was great and everything, but I didn't address the root issues. And you talk about this a lot, but until you do that, you're never going to fix the problem. It's just going to mask it. So I was using keto as a mask for my issues. And so what would happen is I would do really, really well on keto. And then I would stop and get off of it and binge and eat all the carbs, gain a bunch of weight, which to my brain then was signaling like carbs are bad. Right. And so I developed this thing called carbaphobia, and it's a real fear, and it's fear of eating carbs because they make you gain weight. And a lot of women have a lot of clients that have carbophobia because they've lost so much weight on keto that their brain now thinks that if they ever eat carbs, they're going to gain it all back. And so because when they did eat carbs, they did gain it all back, but it's also like, well, what type of carbs were you eating? Nobody binges on sweet potatoes and like oatmeal when they get off of keto. They binge on the crap, the refined carbs and sugar. And so this carbophobia, I realized I had it a few years ago when I discovered that I had high cortisol and some issues with my thyroid and some gut issues. And so I was told, I worked with some naturopathic doctors, and they were like, we need to cycle in some carbs. And I was scared. Mm-hmm. I was literally in fear. Like I would do it, and then like I'd step on the scale and I gained weight because of course, carbohydrates retain water. Glycogen holds water, like 3 to 4 grams of water. So it's inevitable. I mean, it goes away, and so I would keep on going back to keto. And that's when I was like realizing like, oh my gosh, I am afraid of eating carbohydrates. And it really was a process. And to be honest, I'm still working through it. I still in the back of my mind have this like, well, you lost over 110 pounds with keto. That's the only thing that works, Lesya. You can't lose weight unless it's with keto. And I know that's not true, but it's so ingrained in my head because of years of depriving myself of carbs and getting the results. And then when I eat them, of course I gain weight because I'm bringing back all the unhealthy ones. But now I'm learning that, cycling in healthy carbs does not make me gain weight if they're healthy. And I'm not going to binge on them. And that was just kind of a process that I had to go through. And I'm still dealing with the carbophobia. I think I have like the sugar, I don't binge eat anymore. And the sugar addiction, I kind of work through too. But the carbophobia, I'm going to be honest with you, it's like been the hardest to get over.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That is so fascinating. And
this is something, by the way.
Yeah. And this is kind of new to me, even just like understanding it in that way. And it makes so much sense and this is a slippery slope, especially now more people are becoming aware of how dangerous sugar is, right? And the processed white carbs, right? So this fear would naturally be, evolving, right? And it reminds me of, back in my parents' generation, or even when I was really young, right? This whole fat phobia, right? Like we went through that whole time where, the society and the food industry was like, fat is bad, right? And it's going to make you fat. Right. And we're still, I think, like repairing that damage. I mean, I still notice that sometimes, like even in me, and even though I was young, when I wasn't in my dieting years, when that kind of came into effect, but these phobias that we have around food, we do have to be really careful, how quickly this can become like a new obsession. And like you said, like an actual phobia, an actual real trauma response in the body of a result that may or may not happen, right? Because of past, experiences or not doing it in a healthy way in the past. Right. So this is really interesting when we start talking about like the mindset and the actual psychology behind food and eating, right? And how many of us have actually, created such a fearful relationship with food. I haven't met a woman who isn't afraid of food in some way, right? Like some sort of battle and war, whether it's specifically carbs or just eating in general, right? I mean, it's pretty toxic the way that we relate. And this is where, I've become so obsessed with healing, helping women heal their relationship with food, as I know that you do, and going through this journey and really recognizing that. So I really appreciate you sharing that is still something that you struggle with, because it's really real. And I think everybody listening, I bet there's a part of you that can really relate with this as well in noticing that fear that comes up. Maybe it's with fruit, maybe it's with all carbs, right? I don't
fruit,
know.
Right? Fruit. Oh my gosh.
Fruit phobia.
Right. Fruit phobia. I can't eat a banana. Well, it's hard. It's like you do something. I've done keto for 6 years. It's like all I knew. It worked for me. And so of course my brain associated with that, like all carbs are bad, all carbs make you fat. And you would be like shocked how many women feel the same way after doing keto and losing weight. And you're right. Like, I feel like we replaced the fat phobia that we used to have. Now we all have like carb phobia. And it's like history repeats itself.
Yeah, here we go again.
Now we know, right? Now we know that fat's not necessarily what makes you fat, but now we think carbs make you fat. And it's just like, it's toxic, and it's also very sad.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And this is why I really appreciate you opening up this conversation, because everybody listening, the first step is really being aware if this is going on for you and understanding, the truth of it actually being, we can't be afraid of real whole foods, right? Mm-hmm. The junk, yes, the food industry wants us to be hooked on and confused and addicted to, right? So you mentioned earlier about, working with a naturopath and getting back into doing a bit of carb cycling. What is that? And like, how do you actually build that in? Because I know when most people think of keto, they're like, what? There's no carbs. Mm-hmm. So what do you mean carb cycling? Right. And more specifically, like, how has it actually helped you manage your sugar addiction?
Yeah. So with carb cycling, I didn't know much about it until a couple of years ago. I started researching into things to help me with my adrenals, because I ended up burning out my adrenals just from entrepreneurship,
life stress.
And then I have 2 small kids, and I didn't realize how much chronic stress was affecting me until I started gaining weight, and I couldn't sleep at night. I was I was wired and tired. Anyway, I didn't know, but keto was making it worse, because keto is a stressor on your body. So it does raise your cortisol. And so on top of that, keto is great, right? And it works really well, but you have to be careful if you do have a high cortisol and adrenal issues. It might not be a great option for you, which is where you might want to cycle in some carbs. So carb cycling, cortisol, it helps reduce the cortisol, because carbs, they increase your serotonin, helps you relax, especially before bed. And so if you strategically cycle them in, it actually can help heal your adrenals faster. And so what carb cycling essentially is you cycle carbs. So there's some days where you eat, lower carb, whether that's keto or low carb, whatever. And then there's some days that you eat higher carb. So there's so many ways to do this. And I feel like when most people think of carb cycling, they think of athletes or bodybuilders, where they ramp up their carbs really high when they're doing training or they're competing or whatever. And then they have other days when they're not working out and they're relatively low. And we want to be careful with that, because for most women that aren't competitive athletes and these 250-pound men, carbs that high is going to spike their insulin and turn on that fat storage and make their blood sugar go all over the place. And they're just not going to feel good, nor are they going to get the results they want. So we still want to be mindful of the insulin levels and how many carbs we're taking and what kind. And a lot of times these bodybuilders and these like macro coaches will be like, yeah, just doesn't matter, what kind of carbs you eat, just if it fits your macros. So they're like eating Pop-Tarts and like candy. And you'll see this a lot in the competitive space. I don't know if you notice, but like these like competitive bodybuilders will like talk about their high carb day and they're just eating like Pop-Tarts and like Twizzlers and Starbursts to get their carbs in. And it's like, it's just not a healthy way to approach it for long-term sustainability. Now, if you don't care and you just care about looking good, then sure. But if you care about health, you need to be a little more strategic. So with carb cycling, what I started doing was, for my adrenals, I started incorporating healthier carbs throughout the week. So I first started, again, when you're going straight from keto, it's really hard to do because your mindset is just like, oh my God, all carbs make me fat. So you kind of have to slowly transition to it. So maybe like one day a week, I started incorporating like, for lunch and dinner, I would just add a carbs, like maybe some sweet potatoes, maybe some lentils, some resistant starch rice, some steel cut oats with protein, and just kind of like got my body ready, like reintroduce my body to carbs. Because also what happens with long-term keto is you become glucose intolerant. And so this is why your body, when it doesn't, it's like use it or lose it. Your body doesn't use glucose. It ends up turning off the receptors. Like your cells no longer, they forget how to process it because they don't need to, because you haven't been giving it any glucose. And so then when you bring it back, a lot of times, people feel bloated. They feel tired. They like feel like they have cravings for more carbs. They gain a bunch of weight on the scale. Well, that's not necessarily because of the carbs. It's because your body forgot how to process the carbs because you haven't had them in a while. So you have to slowly introduce them. So I slowly started to introduce them, especially in the morning when my cortisol was really high. And I just noticed that my symptoms went away. Like I didn't feel as wired and tired anymore. My body fat started like actually becoming lower, which is a big thing because like there's a difference between losing weight and losing fat. And I just felt more like mellow. And I didn't feel as restricted. And that's like the biggest thing, because with keto, what I found was with strict keto, I would always be on this like binge restrict cycle. I would do keto and be really good with it for like a few months. And then I would like go binge and have all the carbs in the world. And with carb cycling, it allows my brain to be like, we're not restricting any carbs because we're having them on this day and that day and whatever. And you just have to be a little more strategic. As far as my sugar addiction goes, I will say that the big thing that's helped me with it was taking a year off of sugar, which I can get into that in a little bit here. But, and then from there, because that whole year was like the worst year, was 2020. And I learned so much from that experience. And it helped me, because I think you talk about this a lot, is like, what are we using sugar for? And I realized when I was like craving sugar and I'm like, well, I can't have it because I said no sugar. I had to look for other outlets. So that year kind of helped me figure that out. But with the carb cycling, it kind of helps my brain not go into this binge restrict cycle where I can't have carbs. The sugar addiction piece was like a whole other part of it. So yeah, if you want, I can get into that. I just decided, because I think you talked about this in your sugar summit, because that's like where I found you, where how there's different types of people. There's like moderators and there's abstainers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think you talked about that. And so I found out that I was an abstainer. Like I couldn't moderate my sugar intake. I either had, like, if it was there, I'd eat it all. So in 2020, I decided I'm just going to give up sugar for an entire year. Now, for those who are listening, like, okay, well, what does that mean? Did you have fruit? Did you have this? Did you have like all the nuances? So I had 0 refined processed sugar. So I allowed myself low carb fruit because I was still doing low carb then, all strict keto, and then some sweeteners, so like stevia. But what I noticed, which is so interesting, which if I did have anything with sweeteners, I actually was craving more sugar the next day, because the dopamine receptors were signaling like, I'm getting something sweet, I'm getting something sweet, but there was no calories of sugar. And my brain's like, we want more. So I had to actually end up giving that up too. But I took a year off and it taught me a lot about how much I was relying on sugar to soothe myself. And you talk about this all the time, and to like how like stressed, if I was stressed or celebrate like birthdays, right? It's like kids' birthdays and they had cakes and I got them special cakes and stuff. I didn't have any. And I kind of felt left out a little bit. I'm not going to lie. But then a part of me was like, I need to go through this to just learn that like life isn't about sugar. And you could still be happy and enjoy the moment of your kids celebrating another year on this earth and that they're healthy and they're alive. And it has nothing to do with cake, right?
Yeah.
So that was a whole experience. And it kind of all just intertwines. So
yeah, this is so powerful. And I do want to dive deeper into like your year off sugar and everything that you learned, because I think that's so fascinating and so powerful for everyone listening that might be ready or wanting to do that. Right. So you mentioned a little bit, but like, I want to start at the beginning then with that journey. Like, why did you decide to actually take a year off of sugar? Like, what was your real deep motivation to do that?
Because I was scared to death, honestly. That I was addicted to a substance, that I was dependent on a substance so much. Yeah. Like truly, like people don't, unless you're truly addicted to sugar, and it like almost makes me like tear up because you don't understand the addiction unless you're in it. And people like always like argue, it's like addiction to sugar is not real. How can you compare it to like cocaine and heroin? I'm like, I'm not comparing like the effects of like what happens to you when you're addicted to heroin versus cocaine, or versus sugar, but the actual addiction in your brain and how much you want it. Like it's real. They're both real. And so what happened was like, I truly was, and I was in denial for so many years, but anytime there was sugar around or sugar available, I could not stop eating it. And I was like, if it was like on the counter in my kitchen, I thought about it all day until it was gone. And I'd like walk. And when I realized it was a problem, Danny, was like my husband, he's a moderator. He doesn't care for sugar. I could make a dessert, like an actual dessert, like not keto dessert, but actual dessert. And it will sit there and like mold, because he'll take a couple bites or have a piece there and just walk away. And if I'm not going to eat it, it would just sit there and mold, right? That would never happen with me. Like it would have to be eaten. And so I realized, I was like, how come he has no issues with this, where he doesn't, how do you not want these? How do you not want crumble cookies? How do none of these flavors sound good to you? When I'm just like, I want them all. Right. And so I was like, holy crap, I think I have a problem. And I was like, look, I know myself. You have to know yourself. Awareness is number one. So you have to realize, are you a moderator or are you abstainer? If you could, here's the, like my number one, like rules. Like if you could literally have dessert sitting out in your kitchen and be fine and not eat it like every day, and like it not like taunt you, eat me, you'll probably be a moderator. If you're just like every day you see it, like I have to have it, just like this little more, you're probably an abstainer, where you do have to abstain and like work on the root issues. And I realized I was an abstainer, and I said, you know what? Because I've given up sugar like for a month, for like a week, everybody does like 5-day sugar detox. But then what happens after the 5 days? You don't really discover your root issues of how dependent you are on sugar and how to overcome that addiction in 5 days. A year? Yes. A year is plenty of time to really get to the root. And so I gave it a year, and I will tell you, it was one of the hardest years of my life, considering it was COVID and like, all the stress and everything, and like wanting to like use dessert and sugar as a comfort. And I just said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not, like, I said a year, I'm going to do it. And like the hardest was the first, like, I'd say 3 months after I legit had withdrawals. Like I had headaches, and this was like, even after doing keto for so long, this just shows how much root, like in the root of my brain, I was still addicted to sugar, and I was using keto to mask it. But like those 3 months, I had headaches. I had like, I swear, like I was like jittering. I was like just cravings. It was insane. I was like, it's sugar. It blew my mind, but I stuck to it. And after 3 months, it got a little easier. And then like, you know, it was just hard to navigate through events and birthdays, like I said, and occasions. And like, you know, like alcohol and stuff and drinks, it's like, why, if it has syrup, all the cocktails and all the things, I truly had to ask. I had to be that annoying person that was like, you know, is there any syrup in here? Is there any sweeteners in here? And sometimes like people would be like, no, but it's honey. And I'm like, well, I'm not doing honey either. Things like that, like little nuances. It's kind of annoying, but it's like, you have to do it to go through the process. And after the year, I had a choice. I was like, okay, am I going to bring back sugar in a way that like I could still live my life and like not completely eliminate it forever? Or do I just want to abstain, keep going? And I truly, it was like January 1st. It was like, am I going to be like January 1st ready with like a batch of brownies fresh out of the oven? Like the clock hits midnight here. I didn't do that because every January I do like a fast for religious purposes. So I didn't have sugar until like March. I just made the decision, you know what? If it's worth it, is it worth it? Like for me, if it's something that I'm not really into and it's just like processed refined sugar, like Debbie cakes, I'm not impressed. Now, crumble cookies or like a homemade chocolate cake, like, yes, that's worth it. So what happened was after the year and I went through that and did all that work, I realized that like now I'm not, when I have sugar available, I don't binge on it like I used to. And that's the biggest thing for me, because before it was like, I had to eat it all. And that whole year doing that work and giving it up. And some people might take longer, some people might take shorter, but that year truly, it taught me that like I'm going through that deep work of knowing like, what else can I do to soothe myself that doesn't rely on having sugar? And now I'm at the place where I have dessert every here and there, not every day, not even every week. But when I do, I have it till I'm satisfied and I don't like have to keep having it.
Yeah. That's freedom.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible, Lesya. That's just so incredible. Thank you for sharing your journey. That's so powerful in all the things that you have learned in that. I have two questions that I can imagine my audience really wanting to know more about this year off of sugar. Number one, like what did you do? What did you actually do? Or how did you actually begin to do the inner work when you were, you know, when sugar was no longer an option, right? That crutch is gone. You know, what tools and resources and people did you lean on? Like what sort of things were a part of your inner healing?
I got on my knees and said, please God, sweet baby Jesus, help me get over No, sometimes I did that. You know, it's very interesting because I started to just like really think about like, okay, I want the sugar and why do I want it? So I started to, you know, journal a lot about like, what am I feeling right now? And it sounds like, I know people talk about feelings, but it's truly all about that. And what I started realizing was that it was just like, I wasn't getting a need met, whether that was, you know, support, comfort, love, you know, like a lot for me, it was a lot about stress. I was like using sugar to comfort me from like the stress of like, you know, dealing with kids whining all day and screaming and like motherhood and this and that. And I was just like, oh, sugar was kind of like my instant comfort. So I had to find other ways. So what really helped me was journaling about just like what I'm feeling and, you know, what I'm struggling with, kind of doing that deep work where I'm like looking for more into myself of, how do I say this? It's like, how do I soothe myself through my mind? You know,
self-soothing.
Yeah. And so like meditation. And of course I wasn't like able to be as consistent with it as I'd like, but I did do that. I did meditation. I did a lot of journaling. I read a lot. I read a lot in general, a lot of personal development, mindset stuff, listen to podcasts, almost kind of like sometimes I feel like I just needed to distract myself really and just get away from it and like remove myself from the environment. But then another part that really helped me was just like knowing the purpose of why I'm doing this. My why. And I talk about my deep, like the deep why a lot with like my clients and everything. It's like, if you're not if like you don't truly know your deep why, your deep rooted why, then like any temptation that comes in your life, you're just going to give into it. You have to be truly rooted. It's almost like a mission statement. You almost have to have like Post-its all over everywhere. It's like, why? What is your deep why? Why are you doing this? Why is this important to you? And I had it written down. Like, why am I giving up sugar? Why am I doing this work? Because I did not want to be a slave to sugar for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And so I had to remind myself of that. And, you know, my husband was really supportive. He knew I was on this journey. He was really supportive. Although he told me later, he didn't think I would last a month. Like, thanks, bro. Thanks. But like, I mean, that just proves how much he knew how much like I was addicted to sugar. And with kids, you know, kids want sugar all the time. And they're always like, Mom, can we get ice cream? Can we do this? Can we do that? And it's like, I just had to really get into myself of like, what was the reason for me doing this? And then finding outlets like that, journaling, meditation, just going, like taking a walk, working out, getting endorphins. I had to get that dopamine somewhere else, you know?
Right.
And so I just kind of like started, you know, reading, praying, honestly, like reading the Bible, just finding comfort that like, it's all going to be okay, because most of the time why I wanted sugar had nothing to do with because I was hungry.
Yeah.
It was something emotional that wasn't being met, some need.
Right. I love that way of explaining it. You know, that's what I've seen very much in my journey and practice, right? This deep, we all have that, right? There's some need that hasn't been met. And some people will even call that a trauma, right? If we actually go back and look at, you know, even our childhood and the needs that weren't met and how that actually really leads into, you know, wanting to comfort. Yeah, let's not do that. Okay, that's a whole other podcast. That's another podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. What it is, but it all ties in, right? Because now we're adults and we notice that we, you know, are using these for coping, right? And like you said, comfort. And, you know, I know you mentioned as a joke, but you did mention at the end. And I think that is a really important piece that people forget, is oftentimes like getting comfort from whatever spiritual beliefs you have, right? Or religious belief, like understanding that, you know, we are, you know, all connected and so there's something greater out there, right? That's been a big part of my journey as well. And leaning on those, you know, those energies and those beliefs and whatever you want to call it, you know, and I think that is such an important part that people forget in this journey, right? That we do have ways to self-comfort, right? With whatever beliefs that we have, you know, and these other amazing tools that you used, right? With journaling and meditating. And this is just incredible. So I'm curious, like you mentioned a bit earlier, right? Those first 3 months were really difficult, which makes a lot of sense, right? Your body is, you know, and the dopamine, obviously your dopamine receptors are having to rebalance too, which maybe is another question after this one. But what did you do? Like how the heck did you stay motivated when you had headaches and you felt like crap and people around you were all eating sugar and all the temptation was there? You know, I know a lot of my listeners, you know, that's a big part, is like, wow, I can't give up sugar. It's going to be too hard. And then I'm going to have withdrawal symptoms and I'm just going to not be able to do it. Right. So how did you get through those tough times?
Yeah. So the first thing was to just be prepared for them. So you have to know that if you are truly addicted to sugar and you're going to give it up, you're going to go through withdrawal. And so I kind of had that mindset of expectation of it's going to happen. If it doesn't, yay me. But if it does, it's like, well, duh, you're addicted to sugar, fool. No, you know, I was like talking to myself like, well, duh, what did you expect? You know, after binging on sugar for all these years. And so when they came, I was like, it was almost actually having the withdrawal motivated me even more. You know why? Because it made me realize like, holy crap, my body is physiologically addicted to sugar. And if I don't address this now, what's going to happen later? It's going to get worse. Another thing that really helped me was outside accountability. So, you know, I'm on social media because I have an online business and I told all my followers I'm giving up sugar. So 2020, right? January 1st, I had this post, the year of no sugar. And it was like one of my most, it was like literally just a quote. Sometimes it's shocking to me what like people like. It's just like 2020, a year without sugar. Hey guys, I'm giving up sugar this year. And it blew up and people are like, oh my God, how? Oh my God, how you do it? Like keep us posted. It's like, yeah. So having that outside accountability really helped because like, okay, if I give in, then I just look like such a pansy to all my followers and all the people that I just told, like, it's like that integrity part. So I would say like, if you're trying to give up sugar, tell the world, truly tell everybody, tell your family, tell your friends, tell social media, because they're going to come back like, how's that no sugar thing going? Or if like you go to the party and you're eating dessert, like couldn't even last a week, could you? And then you're like, dang it. You're like your inner, like challenge yourself and competitive self is like, oh, I have to do this. Right. So that really helped. I told social media, I told my followers, I told my friends, I told my family, it's like, I'm giving up sugar for a year. Like, you're crazy. Why would you do that? And I was like, well, because I'm addicted to it. And like a lot of people actually, it was funny because it's not funny actually, but people they're like, you can't be addicted to sugar. And like, I truly believe that like people don't understand that you can be addicted to sugar. And a lot of people, when I told them why I was giving it up, they almost kind of like laughed at me and they were like, oh, okay, addiction to sugar, kind of like drugs. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Kind of like drugs. And until I explained really like what symptoms I was getting in withdrawal and all of that, it's almost like to them, it was like mind boggling. And that's, well, of course it's mind boggling to you because you're not addicted to sugar. So how would you know what that's like? And so that really helped me get through it. And then just knowing that at the end of the year, how proud I would be of myself, that after struggling for so many, truly like decades at this point with sugar, that I was able to just like give it up for an entire year. And so it was kind of that. And I will tell you, there were moments where I almost gave in. It was like towards the end of the year. I even remember, I think it was like my daughter's birthday. She's an October baby. And we have like a local baker that does the cakes and they're amazing. And she like got like a strawberry, like I can just think of it right now. And I'm like already salivating, like, and it looked so good. And right. And I was like cutting the pieces for everyone. And of course this like whole cake was left over. And I was just in my mind, I was like, well, just a slice. And I was like, no, I just made it 10 months. So at a certain point, when you set a goal so big, when you're like halfway there or close to that, like your mental capacity is like, I'm not about to break it. So that's why I'm always about setting big goals. You set little ones, you're like, okay, well, I'll get there. And like, that's cool. And I got it. It's like, no, set big ones. Cause then when you're like halfway there, a quarter way there, you're going to be like, okay, I can either start from scratch and start over, or I can keep going. And so it's almost like this mental game you have to play. It's all mental. It's really all up here anyway. And I had to just play these mental games with myself and just say, you know what? There's no way that like in 2020 or 2021, that there's going to be a sugar shortage. I just know it. It's not like all of a sudden I'm going to wake up January 1st and the world's going to announce that there's no more refined sugar. I wish, wouldn't that be great, in the world? I'm like, I'm going to have, like, I can still have sugar for the rest of my life. Right? Yeah. Like no one's taking it away from me. I could just make a choice right now to go through this process, to heal and to recover essentially. And then the rest of my life, if I want sugar, I can have it. And so it's like that. Almost. And I feel like a lot of women think that it's like, oh my God, I have to have the cake, as if like someone's like saying they're never going to have cake again or something. Or like, oh, I can't give up sugar because it's just, the summer is coming and there's going to be all of these events. I'm like, but how many more summers are you going to have? Mm-hmm. And so those are the things that really helped me, that outside accountability, just being able to tell other people that I'm doing this and holding, just having someone else kind of hold me accountable, knowing, expecting what's going to happen. And then kind of getting through that hard times. And then knowing, looking back of how long, like what I've gone through already, like how far I've gone, and like, am I going to give up or should I just keep going?
Yeah. Sounds like you'd really tapped into your like inner warrior at that point, right? Mm-hmm. Like this, like I've committed to this and I've told the world about it. So I'm doing it. Right. And good for you. Right. It really is. And how brave. I mean, obviously you set out to do this before we even knew what was going to happen in 2020, but I think that to me feels like such an extra difficult time. Right. And that I think is inspiring for everybody listening, right? No matter what's going on in the world, right? I mean, it was extra stressful, extra fearful, extra emotional for every human being on the planet. And here you are still staying committed to this journey. So that like, if you can do it during 2020, then anyone can do it. Right.
Right. Like, exactly. Honestly though, I was like, yeah, COVID happened like around March and I was like a couple months in, I'm like, dang it, this is like the worst time to not have sugar. But then it was also the best time. When I look back, it was the best time because I finally learned how to self-soothe and how to deal with my emotions and manage what's happening in my head without relying on sugar.
Yeah. Yeah. This is why I always love, I always have women right before, I get started with one of my group programs. They're like, oh, I'm going on vacation. It's the wrong time. Like, will this work? And I'm like, this is the perfect time because you can do this work in the most difficult situation, right? Which for a lot of people is vacation, right? Or pandemic, whatever. Take your pick,
and
right?
if you can get through it on a vacation or a pandemic, you can get through it at any other time in your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah. Those are the times to do it, I think, because you do get like that. It's like getting training at the highest level, right? Yes. Of really like going through the most difficult things. So going forward, when life throws difficult things at you, which it will, you have those skills, right? And you know that you can do that, right? So enough with the excuses, everyone. If you're feeling called to do that.
Seriously, it's like, I don't know. I'm sure you saw that, like the graphic or meme on social media was like, I was about to start my diet, but then it was like 4th of July, and then it was Memorial Day, and then it was like Halloween, and then Christmas came, and then it was New Year's. Yeah. And it's like, there's always things happening the whole year, every single year. You just got to make a choice to do it and do it.
Yeah. There's never a good time to start something. Never. Right? Never. I mean, people always tell me that about kids, right? Hey, Danny, and there's never a good time. Just do it. Right. Like,
no, you're never ready. I will tell you, after having wasn't ready, still not ready. You just do it.
Yeah. You just make it happen. Right. So, wow, this has been so incredible. I have so many more questions for you, but we'll probably have to record another episode. This has been so great. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I've gotten a lot out of what you shared, and hopefully everybody listening as well. Are there any final words or anything, last message that you want to share with everybody listening?
Yeah. So, if you are someone that realizes that you do have a problem with sugar and you do want to give it up, the first thing that I would say is just to become aware of what type of person you are. So, those two categories are really the best for me to kind of describe it, is like, are you a moderator or are you abstainer? And chances are, if you have problems with sugar, you probably are abstainer, where like you have to abstain and take that time to recover from that addiction. And the real thing, if you're going to go on this journey and do that, the number one thing I will tell you is to discover like your why, your deep rooted why of why you want to do this work. Because just to give up sugar, let's say to lose 10 pounds, or, because you find like you want to fit in a bikini and sugar is your problem, that's not gonna keep you going. It's just not deep enough. So, what I have my clients do is I have them write down like there's 7 layers deep why. So like you ask yourself why 7 times. I'm sure you've heard of this, Danny, and you get down to like why, kind of like a toddler, like a really annoying toddler, like my toddler that always asks me why about everything. Why, mom? Why this? Why that? And so you're like, why do I want to give up sugar? Oh, because I want to lose 10 pounds. Why do I want to lose 10 pounds? And then you keep going. And then 7 layers deep within your 7 answers, you're really going to probably find your deep rooted why. If it doesn't make you cry, you haven't found it. Yeah. So you got to go that deep. And then when you have that core reason, then from there, you make a decision of what I want to do. How long do I want to do it? What is it going to take? You put that up everywhere on Post-its. So that's one part of it. And the second part of it is like, if you find yourself in that binge restrict cycle of whatever diet that you're on, you really need to rethink about what is the root reason why you keep doing this. And you can try all the diets in the world, but that's not going to fix your root issue. Okay. And so like, if you do have the carbophobia, you need to realize like, okay, am I going to be able to go my whole life without eating carbs? Or do I find a way to bring them back in a healthy way through like something like carb cycling and be able to heal my relationship with like why I'm so afraid of them in the first place? And if you keep on jumping from diet to diet to trend, you're not going to find that. That's just going to be your whole life. And so that's kind of like my last parting words of wisdom.
Words of wisdom from Lesya. Thank you so much. That is so powerful. And what a really great reminders for everybody to wrap things up. And, that's a message that you're all familiar with, here on the podcast. We're obsessed with doing that inner work because that's where real change happens, right? really from this inner place. So I appreciate that message very much, Lesya, for people who needed to hear it again and again and again, right? Like this is, if we want to get off the like quick fix bandwagon and actually figure out what's going on at the root, we have to be willing to do that. And it does take a level of like bravery and warriorness to really look at that, right? Because it's not easy. It's difficult. It's painful. It makes you cry. And embracing all of that, right, is the path to freedom. Freedom. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Lesya. So where can everybody come and find more about you online and everything that you're up to?
Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram at Eat Be Fit Explore, Facebook. You can search my name, or you can go to my website, bsbtribe.com, and find all kinds of good stuff there.
Amazing. I'll make sure all those links are below in the show notes, of course. And thank you again, Lesya, for joining us. I have absolutely loved our conversation and can't wait to have you back again in the future.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, everyone. Have an amazing day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.